I'm going to show you how to build a dynamic course landing page using some of my favorite technologies, Next.js, Tailwind CSS, and using DatoCMS as our headless CMS to host all the data behind the scenes. Let's just go ahead and see how to do it. What's up, everyone? If you're new to the channel, my name is James Q. Quick, and I do weekly videos on web development related topics. I do a lot with JavaScript and React and Next.js and Jamstack and all the other buzzwords that you might be interested in, including working with headless CMS options. And this video is actually sponsored by one of my favorite headless CMS options, which is DatoCMS. Now you'll get to see a lot about DatoCMS throughout this video, but a couple of highlights here. They have native GraphQL support. It's right there out of the box. They've got a great editor. They've got nested blocks, which we'll get to see here. They've got a focus on localization, and the tools just work really, really well. So that's what we're going to use to build out this dynamic course landing page. Now, another reference here is we're going to kind of imitate this getting started with JavaScript landing page from Chris Sev at better.dev. Our better.dev is the actual URL. And then if you go to his courses page, there's the getting started with JavaScript. Chris is a friend of mine. He built some of the best landing pages I have ever seen, to be honest. So I thought it would be cool to go and imitate the stuff he's built. And again, we'll build this with Next.js, Tailwind CSS, and DatoCMS to host all of our data. One thing I do want to show you, if you actually want to learn to get better at Tailwind, he has one of the best courses on this called Beginner Tailwind, where he actually shows you how to build this course landing page. So it's definitely worth checking out his content, even if it's just for that. But all the stuff is amazing. So that's what we're going to build. Now, I want to walk through just kind of the concept of what data modeling is inside of when we get to our project inside of DatoCMS. So what this looks like, if we want to create a generic / dynamic backend content system for courses, think about the things that are on this page. We've got our header. This has not just a title, but it's got kind of a small title and a big title. I don't know if there's a better wording for that. Then it's got a subtitle or details or description. And then it's got a button here to take you down to the pricing page. And then if we look at here, here's a general call out. So you might have like small title, big title, again, details, text, then an image that you can show on the right. This stuff is also going to be responsive. So we'll talk a little bit about that in our Tailwind stuff as well. Then in the what you learn section, you'll need a list of bullet points basically for what you'll learn. And then he's got down here how many lessons and how many hours of content that we can highlight. And then we've got our pricing section where we have two different pricing cards. We've got the price on there, the bullet points, the text for the button, the fine print text down here is what I end up calling it. So there's lots of different pieces of data that we're going to have. And so we're going to model that inside of DatoCMS. So let's go ahead. I'm going to let's just go to datocms.com and start from there. So you can sign up for an account with DatoCMS for free. So you can do that. You'll need to do that to follow through this tutorial. And then I'm going to create a new project and we'll start with a blank demo. Now you can start with a fully fledged demo with a bunch of different pieces of content and stuff in there. But in this case, we're going to start with a blank one. So what is the name? We'll do JQQ courses demo. It's pretty similar to the one I just created. And again, what we're going to do is kind of replicate or translate the pieces of information that are inside of this website to actual pieces of content in DatoCMS. So did we get into, there's the GraphQL API. We'll see that in a second. But let's go into our courses demo. Let's go and enter that project. So the two tabs we'll work in most in here are going to be the settings, and then inside of settings, there are models and blocks. So models are where we define some sort of data type that we want and define what sort of fields it can have. And then blocks library is where we can define basically custom components that we can then reference inside of our models. So we'll actually end up doing a lot of that. And it's actually kind of cool because we get complete control over this and you can have nested blocks and all sorts of stuff. So let's start with, let's just start building out our blocks library. Now there's going to be several of these, so this will take a little bit of time. I'll have links in the description below if you want to jump ahead to different parts. But let's start with a course header. All right, so we're just going to kind of start at the top of this page and then kind of work our way down. And maybe we'll actually do this progressively. Maybe we'll do one section and then go ahead and set that up in Next.js and then go piece by piece. Maybe we could do that. All right, so we've got our course header. Now, what kind of fields is this going to have? Well, we're going to have two pieces of single line text. One is going to be the small title. Notice you get the field ID down here automatically. We could do validations. We won't do this for all of them, but if I was really taking my time, I probably would to make this one required and have a minimum number of characters and that kind of stuff. So we'll do that for the small text and the big title. Actually, I think it should have been small title, big title. Did I do that? Yeah, I did. Cool. And then we'll have the same thing for a button text. So what is the text that's going to actually display on that call out button? And then we'll have a description, which is going to be a multi-paragraph text. All right, so there that is. So that is going to be one little component that we can use. And then what we want to do is create our model for our actual course. So we can go ahead and do that. And let's go into models and create our course. All right, so here's our course. And we'll say, yes, that's good to go. And then let's add some new fields to this. So we'll have a piece of text. Now this is just going to be the name of the course, for example. And then we'll also want to have a slug for the course, which will basically be the URL. So we'll come down and look at the SEO, and then we'll have the slug here. Now, another thing I like in here is that it has SEO meta tags right kind of there for you, so you can make sure that you have all the details for SEO that you want. We won't go over the top with this, so we'll just start with slug. And then if we go to validations, we can say that this will reference the name field. So it'll take that name and then basically kind of automatically generate the slug there. And then what we're going to add now is modular content. So this will be course details, and then this field ID has to be singular. So inside of this, now we can say, what sort of models can people put in? Now this is the full flexibility of this, where we can say, hey, people can put in any of these things that they want, and then they will be able to add those, and they can pick and choose which sections they want for their different courses. All right, so that looks good. We can actually go ahead and get started. So we can go into our content and we can create a new course, and we can say this is going to be JavaScript, getting started with JavaScript. All right, so that's going to be the course. And then we'll have in here the other piece of information, which is our course header. So if we look inside of here, it's getting started with and then JavaScript. So the small title is getting started with and then JavaScript, and then the button is let's get rid of this is the kind of final version that we're going to build. This should be get the free course, and then we'll just copy in this little piece of text here. All right, so there that is, and then we can save and publish this thing. Cool, so that will work. So to get started in here, let's go and open up my terminal and let's create a Next.js application. So npx create next app, and we'll call this my courses app with DatoCMS. Is that too long? I don't know. But let's go ahead and create that. While that's running, let's go back and look at the API Explorer. I'm going to open this up in a new tab. And this is using GraphQL. So you're probably, if you've worked with other CMSs or anything like that, you may have seen GraphQL before. It's very handy. It's very nice. And what we'll do is we'll just start by querying course, and then we'll look at the ID and name. So let's go ahead and run that. You see we get our getting started with JavaScript. And then if we kind of hold down Command and click on top of this, you'll see our course record. And if we go into that, you can see the different properties that it has, including the course detail. Course detail. And then inside of here, we're going to have to basically kind of check for the different types of records that we might have. And what we can do is this triple dots and then on and say course header record. So if there is a course header record, grab the small title, the big title, and the button text and the description, I think, is all we need. And if we query this, that should give us everything we need to actually build out this header for our site. So let's see. All right, we've got our Next.js project is good to go. So let's go ahead and open this up. I'm going to use code-r command here and then scroll through all this. I've got all these projects from Advent of JavaScript. You should check it out at Advent of JavaScript or adventofjs.com. Those are all the different challenges. But let's open up my course app with DatoCMS. Cool. Now we can search for setup Tailwind CSS and Next.js. The Tailwind docs actually have a good guide to this. So we'll need to install a few different packages, dev dependencies. So we'll install Tailwind CSS, Post CSS, and Auto Prefixer. Cool, that installed pretty quickly. And then we can use the Tailwind command to call init. So npx tailwind init-p. -p is going to be for post CSS too. So we'll have our post CSS config is created. We don't need to touch that. The Tailwind config is created, and then we can update that content section like so. This is basically an array that will tell Tailwind which type of files that it should look at to work with. So in this case, we're going to look at anything inside of the pages directory, that's .js for us, and then inside of the components directory as well. All right, and then we can go into our global CSS. Let's just get rid of everything that they give us. And we'll want to set up or go ahead and import these base utilities or components or whatever from Tailwind. So we can paste those in. If you've gone through Tailwind setup in the past, this is pretty similar, I think, to what you've probably already done. And then let's open up our index page, and we're just going to kind of wipe all of this out. So we don't need to import styles. We don't need to import image or head. We're not going to worry about the head in this case. So I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom, leave this empty div, and then get rid of this class name because we'll do that with quotes here in a second. Cool. So we should have, let's see, testy test is usually something I go with. And let's go ahead and run this just to see that it will actually run and that we have Tailwind set up appropriately. So this should be up. Let's go to localhost 3000. And hey, it's working. It's Tailwind kind of gets rid of all base styling. So you see, even though it's an H1, it's small and we have to go and do all that ourselves. Now, what we want to do is be able to query all of this information from GraphQL. So I'm going to install a package, and I think this is going to be GraphQL request. Yeah. So this will help us make these GraphQL requests. So GraphQL request, we'll install that package. And then inside of the index, we'll just copy over a query and then use that to actually make our query. So what we'll need to do is we'll import GQL and GraphQL client from GraphQL requests. By the way, I have GitHub Copilot running, which is actually very good, like much better than I ever thought it would be. So we'll import that, and then we're going to create our query. So const query equals GQL, and then we'll just paste in a query here. So we're going to need to start with, we want to query, let's get rid of that. We want to query by, or we want to say this is a query. And then we want to query by course like this. And then we want to grab the ID, the name, oops, not that, the name, the slug. And then we'll do course detail. We just did that a second ago in GraphQL. We'll do ... on, and then we'll say on the course header record. And then if we get a course header record, we'll grab the type name. We'll need to render this based on the type name. We'll have the big title. We'll have the small title. There we go. We'll have the button text, the description, and the ID. I think that's all we'll be able to query at this point. So there's our query. That's cool. And then what we'll do is we'll want to grab this information or query this information inside of a function called getStaticProps. This will allow us to render this information as a static page. So we'll do export async function and then getStaticProps. And then from here, we need to define what the endpoint is that we're going to query. Now there's one single endpoint for DatoCMS GraphQL. So we will paste that in. All right. And then it looks like this is not an arrow function, so I can get rid of that. So from there, then we'll create a GraphQL client. And this is going to be a new GraphQL client. You can see it's auto completing there for us, which is really cool. I could tab all the way through this probably. So we need headers, content type, application JSON. Yes. We don't actually need X API key. So let's just close this out, close this out, and close that out. Okay. So the thing we do need though is in headers, we need authorization. And we're going to need a bearer token. So we need some sort of string to put after bearer. So this is actually doing good. We probably would get this from DatoCMS API key. I'm going to, I guess, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. We can do that. Let's go ahead and let's copy or let that autocomplete. And what we'll need is a .env file. So I'll create a .env file at the root. Actually, we can do .env.local. And did that create? Did I create? New file .env.local. There we go. I don't know why that didn't create before. And then we want to call this thing the DatoCMS API key. So where do we actually get that API key? Well, if we go back into our project, go to settings. Actually, this setting's up here. And then look for API tokens. There should be a read-only API token. Now, it doesn't really matter if someone gets access to this because it's just read-only, but you can still hide it. So let's copy that, and we'll put that in our environment variables. And then that will be used to create this GraphQL client. Now, from there, now we actually need to make our query. So we'll say course is going to be, we'll await GraphQL client dot request, and we'll pass in that query. That will give us our course. We'll log that course just to see that we have it. And then we will pass that to our page by passing in a props component that includes the actual course. Cool. Okay. All right. Do we have a closing bracket down here? We do not. I think we're missing one. There we go. Okay. I think that looks right. So let's go ahead and start this thing up and let's see what we get. So npm run dev. We should be able to query that information now. Let's go to our home page. Let that refresh and see it's logging stuff out. Nice. That's really cool. So it looks like this is coming back appropriately. Now, what we're going to need to do, if we scroll back up to the top, we're going to need to take those course details, and then we're going to need to figure out, based on the course detail, what piece of information we want to actually display. So let's kind of get rid of this, and then we will get rid of this. And we basically just want to now render out. We want to iterate through. Well, let's grab the course property up here, and we can just log this again in the front end to see it. And let's take our course. So we'll say course detail.map, and we get each one of those sections. And then what we want to render is a course section component that we'll create in a second. And we'll say details is going to be that section that we just created. And I think the last thing we need is some sort of key for this. So did we query the section ID? Yes, we did. So we can say that the key here is the section.id. And then now we need to actually create that course section component. So let's go and create a directory for components, and then create the course section.js. And I've got snippets in here for React functional components. So there it is. And we're going to pass in these details. So we'll pass in the details there. We can log those out. And we can say in here, just course section. And now can I get some IntelliSense to import this? Yes, up there. And now that should look relatively good. So you see it's logging course section up there. And if we come into our console, we should see that it's logging out those details, which is exactly what we want. So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to have a component for our course record, our course, our call out record, our course header record, our course section, learn section record, pricing card, and pricing section record. So let's go ahead and actually just stub out those components. So we will say the first one is going to be call out record RFC, and we'll say H1 is call out. All right, save that. And then we will have our course header record. Rename that from KS to JS. All right. And we'll say this one is going to be course header. That's the one we'll work on in a second. I'm going to go and create the rest of these and we'll come back in a second. All right, so I've just finished creating each one of those different components. They're just stubbed out to say basically what they are in an H1. So I'm going to close all of those out. And then look inside of our course section. So in the course section, what do we actually want to do here? Well, we're just going to basically pass along these details to the appropriate type. So what we're looking at is the type name. So we'll look at if details, it's actually, wow, it's already got it here, course header record. Then let's see if it'll get it didn't quite grab the return there. So if that's the case, then we want to return the course header record. Do we not have course header record? Why is that not giving me IntelliSense and passing those details that way? Can we get the IntelliSense in here? Course header record. Let's see if we name that appropriately. Course header record. It looks like we did. Not sure why we're not getting IntelliSense there, but we'll do this import here in a second. We're basically wanting to just look at the type name of that field and then render that thing appropriately. Now to save a little bit of time, I've got the rest of this that I can just kind of paste in here. So let's see if we paste in this and give ourselves a little more room. You can see we're just checking the type name. If it's course header record, render that. If it's call out record, I don't know why I'm not getting IntelliSense in here. Call out record, don't know. So I will copy in those imports, the learn section record and the pricing section record. And I will cheat and I would just copy in all of these imports. And this should be course header record. Yeah. All right. So that should be good. Let's come back to here and we actually see our course header. So as we add more different types or more different sections to our course, we'll see those actually get displayed based on these components. And we'll have to query those in GraphQL. All right, so let's start to work on our header record. And just to kind of show you again what we're looking at, we're wanting to implement this header. Now I'm just going to focus on the text and the button. Not going to worry about these other images. We could do that if we wanted to, but we're going to spend a long time in this video anyway. So we're just going to kind of work on these parts here. So little title, big title, description, and then button text. So let's go ahead and work on this. First of all, we're going to want classes on everything. That's how Tailwind works. We're going to want a background of BG Gray 2000. And we'll add some padding on X and Y. And I'm going to use a flex box with flex column and then items center. So that'll just kind of stack everything on top of each other and center them as everything is that you can see on the final one. All right. And then inside of here, we're going to have an H1. And our H1 is going to have a few class names. It's going to have text to XL, text center. It's going to be text gray 600 and font bold. All right. So inside of that H1, we want to add the details of small title, and we need to accept that details parameter there. So we've got our small title, and then we want the big title, but this is going to be on its own line. So inside of this H1, we're going to have a span inside of it, and it's going to be slightly different. So it'll be blocked to make sure it's on its own line. It'll be a little bit darker, so text grade 900. It'll be pretty big, so text 6XL, font bold, margin bottom of 10. And let's just see, did we actually write out? No, we didn't include what we're actually spitting out there. So this will be the details.big title. All right, let's just see what that looks like. So if we go to look at ours, yeah, that's starting to look right. We're not going to worry about this nav bar at the top, so we're just going to start here. We've already got our bottom there. And then what I want to do, or margin bottom there, is we'll do paragraph with class name. And this one will have a background of yellow, 300, max width, large, and then text gray, 800, and text large. Let's see what that looks like. Well, we didn't tell it what details to add. So this should be the what am I looking at here? The details.description. All right, so let's just go and look. That is way off over there. I thought this would have been centered already. So we'll have to figure out what we're missing. The other thing is these actually want to be on separate lines. I want these two to be separate lines. And so I could do some different things inside of my in my storage in DatoCMS, but in this case, I'm going to split these in JavaScript. So I'm going to say sentences equals, I'm going to take details.description. I'm going to do exactly what it just did there and split that based on the period. But the sentences has one extra item. So I want to splice out the last one. So I'm saying I want to start at the last item and just get rid of that last one, basically. And then instead of having our P directly, we will iterate through our map. And gosh, it does everything for me, which is ridiculously nice. So what it's going to do is iterate through each sentence, do a paragraph tag for each one of those, which looks like what we just had. We actually want these classes up here. So let's go ahead and we can just copy that and paste in those classes and save it. And that might be pretty close to good. Looks like it's close, but I think we're going to need, we don't actually want these to be, and actually I am looking at the complete wrong thing, I believe, because I was making this text yellow. Maybe that was just when I highlighted it. Interesting. Well, anyway, you can make that yellow if you wanted to. Maybe we will. And we still want these things to be centered though. So let's look inside of this parent div. So I'm not sure exactly what we missed. One thing we can do is based on inside of each sentence, we can do an MX auto. And let's see, that will bring it to the center. And then we can do text center. That may have actually taken care of what we wanted to begin with. So can we get rid of MX auto and just text center? No. So we need to actually still center that thing horizontally with MX auto and then center the text within it. And I think we can go ahead and get rid of the BG yellow since we don't actually need that now. So let's go and get rid of that and keep that part. All right. And then let's see. This should be a much lighter gray, it looks like, in the end. So maybe a 600, maybe even lighter than that. Maybe one more. Maybe that should be a 500. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Now, from there, we need our actual button. So let's go into, after the sentences, we'll create our button. And this will actually not even be a button. It'll be an anchor tag. And we can have it go to a pricing section. So pricing section will have class name equals, and then we will include in here the details.button text. All right, so then classes that we want in here, we want to round this mediumly, BG yellow 300, margin top of 8, margin top of 8, padding on the y-axis 3, px 4, text, gray 800, text XL. Let's just see if that looks close to right. It does. The other thing is I'm not sure why these didn't center to begin with. Why is everything not centered here? Oh, that's because I actually didn't make this flex. That is why. So we shouldn't have even needed what did I add in here? The text center and MX auto. So we should be able to get rid of that. And now see, everything is aligned. Nice, this is what we're looking for. And you see our course. The other thing we can do, we won't do this for all our buttons, but we can do a hover effect on the button, and we can set the BG, the background, now to a slightly darker color. So we can slide it, set it to 400 instead of 300. So we see this little hover effect on that button. All right, so that is the first section in the books. We can close out this component. That should be good to go. We got a few other components to do. I'll probably speed up that process so we're not having to write out every single line, but here's the core concepts that we just went through. Inside of DatoCMS, if we look inside of our content, or let's start with actually our content models. We have one model for course, and the course has a couple of basic properties, name and slug, and then it basically has like these different sections that we can allow users or the creators of the course to add. So what are those different types of sections? Well, it will be course header and call out and that sort of stuff. Right now, it's just the course header. So what we're going to do is now go and create the rest of these content types, the rest of these rest of these blocks in our library so that we can then use them inside of these course details. Now, after we do, and what we just did is then after we add that information, we can query it with our GraphQL and then start to work with it and display it inside of our Next.js using Tailwind CSS. So let's go back into our blocks library and let's just start to work on these different blocks. So let's go ahead and add the rest of them. So this will be a call out and it will have similar to what we just saw. It'll have a small title, a big title, we'll have a description, which is our longer piece of text, and then we'll actually have an image as well. So this will be media and then a single asset, and this will just be called image. Now, cool thing about DatoCMS is you've got some optimizations and transformations and things that you can do with your images, so that works out really well. All right, so the next thing we're gonna have is our learn section. So our learn, actually first we need to create the learning points. So we're gonna create a different type for the actual learning bullet points. And these will be very simple. It will be a title, and a description. Now, if we look here in a second, let's go ahead and create this and then I'll show you, and a description. That should probably be multi-line paragraph, but single line is fine. If we look in here in this course, for these, it's only using titles for what you'll learn. But if you go to the Tailwind course, for example, in the what you learn, again, these things are so awesome. He's got descriptions in here as well. So this will give us the flexibility. We can add the title and the description, even though we're only going to use the title in this specific example. So those are the only two things we need for the learning point. And then we'll have the learning section. So learning section. And then learning section won't have much. It will basically be a title there. We'll then allow to have these nested blocks for modular content. We'll have this be learning points, and then this needs to be singular. And what type of block can go in here? We'll call this a learning point. Then we'll have two extra bits of information. We'll have the number of lessons, and then we'll have the number of hours of content. So one more in here for that one. All right, and that is going to correspond to, if we scroll down to this part, this little part right here. Cool. So we've got that one, and then a couple more in here. We need a pricing card. And this is going to have a lot of different kind of pieces of information inside of it. There's several different pieces. So we'll go into title first. We'll then have a price in cents. So we'll have the price. Then we'll have a Boolean for whether or not this thing is free. So we'll call this is free. We'll have button text. We'll have fine print. We'll have what I call a price suffix. So the price suffix in this pricing card down here is going to be the /month, or in this case, when it's free, we don't have one at all. So we'll have the price suffix, and then we'll have the description, which is a multi-paragraph description there. And then lastly, we will distinguish between a featured and not featured pricing card. All right, so lots of different details in there. And then we will have the pricing section. And our pricing section will basically have the title and then a list of those pricing cards. So we'll say single line text for the pricing section. And then we will have modular content. And this will be pricing cards. Again, ID is singular. And then we can only add in here a pricing card. Okay, so those are all of the different block types. Now for our course, let's go and update this so that in the course details, we can add more than just a course header. We should be able to not add a learning point. Actually, we want to do learning session, section, and a call out and a pricing section. So what this now allows us to do is inside of the actual content itself, the one course that we have, we can open this up. We have the course header, and now we can start to create our different pieces that we want. So we'll now have the call out, and a call out will have a small title, big title. Let's go and look at the final result here. So it'll be learn the, and then the essentials. Essentials is going to be big title, and then we'll go and copy this text. All right, there. And then I have already, I believe I've already saved this to my downloads folder. So I've already downloaded and saved this. And we're just going to do one image there to keep it fairly simple. So we've updated that image. We've got our call out here. And then we're going to have the learning section. So the title of this will be what you'll learn. We will have in the end of this, how many... 24 lessons and 4.7 hours of content. So 24 and 4.7. And then we'll need to add our learning points. So we'll have types. None of these are going to have descriptions, by the way. We'll have variables. And I'll go in and fill the rest of these out to match what's on the actual course page. And we'll come back in a second. All right, so we've got all of those learning points built in now. That's kind of a long one. Cool. And then the last thing we want is our pricing section. And so for the pricing, the title is going to be get the course, and then we'll have 2 pricing cards. Now with this flexibility, we could add more or less cards later on if we want to. We'll say this one is get just this course. This will be free, so we don't need to look at the price. The text will be get for free. The fine print is lifetime refund guarantee. We won't have a price suffix. And then we'll have 3 little bullet points here that we'll paste in to the description. And then we'll make sure that each one of these is actually listed as a bullet point. Cool, so there that is. And then we'll do one more pricing card. And this pricing card will say get... Is this supposed to be all capital? Let's see. Get all courses. I think it is. So let's say get all courses. The price in cents here will be $1,200. Now this is $12 times 100, or yeah, for pennies to dollars. So this is pennies. Button text will be Go Pro for $12 a month. Cancel at any time. The suffix will be /mo for /month. And then we'll add in our 4 bullet points in here. Let's just make sure these are all bulleted appropriately. Cool. All right. And then this last one is actually going to be the featured one. So now that is all the data that we need. Now we can start to actually query that stuff inside of our GraphQL. So if we look inside of the GraphQL editor in here, if we start to look for other things like ... on, and did we actually publish this? Let's make sure. Yes, published and saved. ... on, and then we can have different sections in here. I think we need to refresh because the model has changed. And then we should get some IntelliSense on what all we have access to. So ... on, and then if I say course, there's call out record and so on and so on. So we basically want to query all those things for all the different possible records that we can have. And I think it would be fair at this point to go ahead and just copy over this entire query, and then I'll show you what it is. So I'm going to copy over this long query. And it's basically just doing exactly what we did for the header record. It's just getting the rest of the details for those other ones as well. So it'll be a little bit longer here. So there's our Q. We're actually not doing Q&A section. That's funny. That was one that I had that I played around with in the previous one, but we're not doing that here. But we have our pricing cards. We have our pricing section. We have our learning points, learning section, call out record, course header record. We already had that. And then the details for the course itself. So now without changing any code, what we should see is we still see, well, we see an error. So that's not exactly what we were looking for. So let's go and see where this is. No such type learn section record. So it can't be a fragment condition. Let's go into our course section components and let's double check all of these here. So we're already logging out the details for each one. So let's log or let's look inside of those details. We're not actually seeing that come through. I think this may be a problem with our actual GraphQL. Field pricing cards doesn't exist on pricing section record. We may have messed that up. So let's go into the settings and go back to the blocks library and look at our pricing section. And this says it has the ID of pricing card. And I actually called it in the end, I called it pricing cards. So let's go back to our query and let's update this. I wonder if I did this in a couple of other places. Let's just say this would be pricing card, although it should be pricing card. Actually, let's go ahead and update that to make sure that it is consistent. So let's edit this field. And this is actually a good example of now we can just edit that and it should be fine. Cool. So with that now changed, let's try to refresh our page. And we get something similar for learning section record. I believe we did the same thing in learning section. If we look inside of learning points, we did the singular, but for that we can actually do it plural. Again, easy enough to go and change the data inside of DatoCMS. And I think my inconsistencies between the original demo and my naming now is just not on par. So this should be the learn section instead of learning. And we'll just go through these. I'll try to speed this up in editing for you all, but we'll just try to run through this and see now it's actually working. Cool. So we're seeing that those sections are actually rendering. We just haven't actually given the details about how to display them, but they are at least rendering the correct components. Now, the thing that's cool about this is after this stuff is already in place, we could go into our content, into our course. And if we wanted to, we could reorder one of these where if I wanted to have the pricing section come after the course header, this is really neat. This is where the power comes in. Now, if I go back to my site and refresh, we should see the pricing section is going to come first. Now, this is complete ability for us to customize what goes where on this page and what information we want to have after or completely outside of the code that's there. So we can change the information, we can change the order of these sections, and then if we wanted to update the styling, we could go back to the code too. So let's put this the way we had it, and then we'll go in and fill out the rest of those components to finish out the course landing page. All right, so let's work on the callout record. We should be through all of these errors. Cool, and then let's also go into index page, maybe get rid of any, let's see, course detail, course section component. Let's get rid of all of these logs, and I think there's one in the header as well. Maybe not. Okay. So now let's get ready for the call out record. So we'll go ahead and do that one. And we will get rid of a call out piece there. We'll take in the parameter of details. And now let's go ahead and start to render this thing. So we'll want a couple of classes on this. This is actually going to be a background of dark gray, so 800. We'll have a lot of vertical padding and then some horizontal padding as well. And then we'll do another div in here. And I like Flexbox a lot, so you see me use this a lot. But we're going to do flex and flex column. Now, this is because we're going to make this responsive here. So we'll get to that in a second. But let's set the max width at 6XL. And then now, Yeah, now we'll do our responsiveness. So when it's medium or above, we want to change this to be a flex row. So if we have space horizontally, let's do that. If it's medium or above, we'll also then center those items, and then we'll add an MX of auto. All right, so a little bit of responsive stuff in here. If you want to actually dive deep into how to build stuff with Tailwind, I highly recommend you go check out the course from Chris. All right, and then inside of here, we want to have a div for our text section, and this will have a class name of. We're going to set medium. We're going to have a width of, and then you can interpolate variables or values inside of here with these brackets. So 60%. We want to set this to grow, and then P-4, so padding 4. Now inside of here, we will have our big title and little title. And I'm going to start copying and pasting some of these in because I think we're probably getting a little redundant. But we have our big title that we want to display inside of the H2 as well as the small title. So same thing we did before. We have the small title, and then we have a span for our big title. And then we have the details of the description here. Now, the next thing, this is basically the left-hand side of that callout. The next one is the actual image. So we'll say this is going to have W-full, so full width, and then P-4. And let's start with setting an image to a source of the details.image.url. So the image property is actually an object, and we want to grab that URL property. So this will work, hopefully, if we did this correctly. Let's go and look at this in here. There's our pricing section. This should actually, if we refresh, should actually move down. Yep. So here, this is looking pretty good. It's also responsive, so it's not perfect, but it is responsive. But this image, Next.js is telling us, hey, we want you to use next image, which can actually do a lot of optimizations and things with images. So if we want to do this, we can import the image from next/image. And then when we use our image component, let's just replace this with the Next.js image component. If we look inside of that query in our GraphQL for image, notice we're querying the width and the height. So we can tell Next.js with this image component that the width is going to be the details.image.width. And then same thing for the height. So we can actually tell it what width and height it will be. And then we can set the alt to be details.little title plus details.big title. Just combine those. All right, so in theory, this would work. This is how you would set this up, but it's saying, hey, we don't actually recognize where this image is coming from. So this is saying we need to add the host name of DatoCMS-assets into the next config. So let's open up our next config. And then inside of here, we need to add an images property with a domains property. And then inside of here, we'll paste in the DatoCMS assets domain. Now, after we do that, I think we have to restart our server for it to recognize those details. So once we load this back up, we should see our image, but now it's actually loading through the next image component, which does a lot of optimizations behind the scenes. If you want to know more about that, go and look up the next image component. But that is our callout section. We've got two more, the learn section and the pricing section. So let's go ahead and get into those. All right, so now we're going to work on the learn section. And if we come to the original site here, you can see this has, it covers what you'll learn, and then it has these cool little like browser looking windows for each one of these bullet points, and then the stuff here at the bottom. Now I'm going to skip some of this stuff. Like I don't think we need to write every bit of this out, but we'll start to work through at least the majority of this. So the first thing we'll want to do is get a reference to our details props. And now we can start to actually work with this. So this parent div, again, a lot of repetitive stuff here with Tailwind, but just going through our styling. We're going to have max width of 8 XL. We'll do MX auto to center everything, center itself vertically. And then we'll have PY of 20 and PX being padding Y and padding X of 8 here. And then now we'll do the H2 for the details.title. All right, and then what do we want this one to look like? Well, let's go ahead and add our class name here. And we'll say this is going to be relatively big text at 4XL. We'll do font bold and then a margin bottom of 8. So if we come and look, this should, let's go to our version. We just have the what you learned section, and then we'll have those pieces underneath it. Looks like this one probably has a smaller max width, so we could potentially make that a little bit smaller, but I think it'll be okay. So from here, we're going to use CSS Grid to actually lay out all those elements. We're going to have a div with a class name of, well, we'll add that in a second, but we'll start with grid, and then we'll say grid calls 1, and that will be kind of our default on small screens. And then on medium and up screens, we'll have grid calls of 2, and then on large, we'll have grid calls of 3. And then we'll say the gap is going to be 8. Grid gap is a property, or just the gap property. I can't remember if it's grid gap. I think maybe it's just gap in regular CSS, but that'll put some spacing in between them. And then this is like right on cue, is autopilot here, or GitHub Copilot. But what we want to return, we actually want to get a reference to the point, and let's just check really quickly in the index for point if we got the ID. Yeah, we got the ID, so we can use the point ID for the index of what we're doing. So we're going to say each one of these is going to be a div, and let's go and get the closing div, and let's see. For point, there's our thing, that thing. I'm just making sure all of these look right. I think it does. We're missing the key prop there. So the key is going to be equal to the point.id. So we queried that ID so that we could use it in here for these unique columns. All right, now let's go in and add the class names. So we're going to use a class of flex column. We'll do text gray of 600, and then we'll do a BG gray of 50. So a really light gray there, and then rounded large. All right, so we won't see much now because we're not actually rendering anything out yet. So let's go ahead and add the stuff that's inside of it. And this will get kind of interesting because we're going to have this top part. If we look inside of the bottom here, or not the bottom, the real final result, we'll have this top part that has these buttons. Now these are circles. These are just, it's actually kind of simple how these get made, but we'll just kind of lay those out, and then we'll have the actual content underneath it in there. So inside of our flex, now we'll have a div with a class name of, and let's go ahead and open up and close the div. But we will add some padding. So we'll say py3, px3. So we'll add some padding there. We'll do flexbox, and we'll say items center, justify between. So we're going to kind of put space in between them. Border of 2. And the border is going to be gray 500. We'll do rounded top large. This is actually kind of neat. I'll show you this in a second. Text gray 700, and then font bold. So this rounded top large, that's going to add the rounded portion at the top here, as you can see. And then we'll do the bottom part of this will have a rounded bottom to make the whole thing kind of have a rounded effect, but it's going to be made up of these different pieces. And then I'm going to let me just copy in which one, I think from here to here. I'm going to copy these in and show you how cool this part is. So underneath this, we are inside of this. We'll have these 3 different sections for each one of those buttons. So they will be inside of a flex box, and then they'll just have a little bit of space. So flex is automatically going to lay these out in a row, and then we'll give a little bit of space in between. And then each one of these is going to have a width and a height, and then rounded full, which will just make it a circle and then give it a background color. It's pretty neat the way this works. I thought this was pretty cool the way Chris did this. So there is that part. And then the last thing underneath that, and if you want to learn more in detail how this is done, again, go check out the Tailwind beginner Tailwind class from Chris on better.dev. But the bottom piece of this now is going to be the actual text. So we'll close out this portion. And then we'll have, I wonder, there's no way that that's actually getting the classes that I want. I think they're in a different order. I can't tell if they're actually what I would want or not. Copilot is pretty cool though. But let's say this element is going to be a flex grow. So it's going to take up as much space as it can. And then it's going to be a flex box with item center, We'll do justify center. That'll center that thing completely, top and bottom, or horizontally and vertically. So we'll do padding y6 px of 8. And this is the cool thing with Tailwind. You get these numbers that you can just kind of mix and match. We'll do the rounded bottom now. Border 2, border gray 500, border top of 0. Now we can, since we already have the bottom border of the top part, we don't need the top part of the bottom, if that makes sense. And then we'll do text center. And then the text here is actually going to be the item.title. I don't know what clipboard item is. And I think this was this item, or did we call it, what did we call it? Point. So point.title. All right, let's see if that is looking right. Cool, that actually is looking really good. And this will be responsive. So since we did the grid with the different breakpoints, it should look pretty good. Now, the last thing on this section is the 2 pieces for displaying the how many lessons and how many hours of content. And again, this is getting long and repetitive. So I'm gonna paste this one in, and then we can kind of talk about this. So this will go right underneath that div section. So we iterated through each of the different points, and we displayed those. Now we want to go in and actually display the different things for the how many hours, or how many lessons and how many hours. Now I've got this hard coded here to 24. This will actually come from the details dot. And let's just go and see if I can remember. Do I have this still logged out in here? Maybe I don't. Let's log out the details so I can make sure I know which property this is. All right, so let's go and see. Oh, I left that little piece down at the bottom here. So let's just get rid of that for a second. And then we'll go, and I just want to see the details here. So there's hours of content and number of lessons are the 2 properties. So this first one is number of lessons. So it should be details.number of lessons. And then the 4.7 will be hours of content. Is that what we said? Number of lesson and hours of content. Yeah. So let's grab that. So details.hours of content. I've been doing a lot of vanilla JavaScript recently with Advent of JS. Go check it out, adventofjs.com. And because of that, I've been doing a lot of like $sign bracket. I don't know why. Why am I getting weird syntax on this though? Let's see. Did I do something weird when I started this? Maybe it messed up some. I don't know what it did, but details dot hours of content. So let's see if all that is rendering correctly. Cool, that looks good. And again, like you can go and check out Beginner Tailwind to see how to do all that stuff. So that's the learn section. Now, last thing we have is the pricing. So we're gonna have a pricing. We didn't need to name these records, but we'll just name that pricing section record as it is. And then we'll create a separate component, or we have our separate component for the actual pricing cards. So let's go and get rid of this default H1. And we will start off with background. We're going to do a purple section now. So BG purple 600, padding Y of 20, padding X of 10, and then a max width of 100. All right, so that should be pretty big. And then we'll have H1 here, class. And for the H1, we want to have some basic stuff. Text center, we'll do text 8 XL, so it'll be pretty big. Font, bold. Text would be white. MB 20 to add a little margin bottom. And we'll have the details.title. How good is GitHub Copilot? Yes, that's what I want. And then now we'll do kind of a wrapper around our actual elements. So I think we could, we've done this before. Maybe, I think I maybe made this a little bit too difficult, honestly, using Flexbox in my example. Let's go back to the learn section. And where did we use grid? Let's actually just copy that. I think that will probably work well. So let's do, let's copy in this div for the grid. So 1, 2, and 3 columns. Cool. Actually, we will probably, let's stick with 2 and 1 in this case. We could kind of set this up to work with 3 if we wanted to. Maybe actually that's why I use Flexbox. So actually, let me go back and use Flexbox because I wanted this to be dynamic enough to where it didn't matter how many pricing cards we have. We could fit them all on here, 1, 2, or 3, honestly. So let's, I'm going to paste this in. So we're going to use Flexbox. We're going to say on large and up screens, it'll be a row. So we'll line them out horizontally. Otherwise, it'll be Flexbox columns stacked on top. We'll space them out vertically, unless we're on a large screen, then we are keeping them even. We will space them out horizontally on a large screen, and I think not do that by default. I can't remember. And then a couple of other things in here to center some of the items. So inside of here, we want to take our details.pricing cards and map over them, and we'll get each card an index. That'll work. And then we'll do our pricing card. I don't know if we've created that or not. I can't remember. And we'll pass those details to it. And then we'll say the key is the index. I think we might have actually queried the key, but whatever. So we don't have the pricing card. Is that an actual component that we created? We did create that. I don't know why I'm not getting IntelliSense or auto imports for pricing card. I'm not sure. Did I name this pricing card? I did. I don't know why. Okay, so let's go in here and import pricing card. There it is. I don't know why that didn't show up originally. And then now this will just this will show the beginning of this and then start to iterate through these. And this will be card instead of item. So let's go and see this one. Let's scroll all the way down. So we have our title here, get the course, and then we have our two cards, pricing card there. So let's go into our pricing card and we'll start to render that out. So this one, as always, we'll take in a details and then we'll start to actually render the card itself. So we're going to end up having two different versions of this card. One is going to be for a featured one and one is not featured. But let's just start with, we'll make the card full width to the parent. We'll do a background of purple 500. Max width is going to be max dash width small. We will add rounded, so we'll rounded large, and then P6 to just add padding P6 all the way around. And now we'll have our actual title. So H3 with white text, so text white. We'll make it a little bit bigger, text XL. Margin bottom 4, and then we'll uppercase that whole thing. And this will be our details.title. All right, let's save that. We should, cool. We're starting to get a little bit closer here. You can see this is starting to look like these. And then now we'll want to add the free part and, or excuse me, the free or paid. So I'm going to say if details is free, dot is free, then we're going to show a span, and we'll open that up with a class name. Actually, we don't have a class on that, I don't think. But we'll just have this say free. So if that is the case, we will have the free part there. If it's not the case, then we want to have a span that actually shows the details.price in cents divided by 100. Now, if I was spending more time on this, I would do more details on this price, because if we just divide by 100, it may not actually come out to an even number. So we might be kind of messing something up. So we might lose some rounding, but that'll be okay. So if it is free, we'll say free. If it's not free, then we'll actually display the price in cents. And then we will say details.price. If there is a price suffix, that little extra bit there, then we will render out, I'm kind of curious, I'm just going to autocomplete that and see. Then we'll render out the details.price suffix, and I think this is a little bit off, but it got the rest of it. So this will just be text large and margin 1 to give it some space. And I think we put, oh yeah, we forgot one bit up here. So we're going to put all of this inside of a p tag, and then the p tag, let's tab this over. The p tag will have a few properties. It'll say text is white, text 6XL, font bold, and margin bottom of 10. All right, let's go and see if that looks right. Cool, that actually looks pretty good. So you see our suffix is showing up here. It's not on this one. This one is showing free, and so on and so on. Cool. And then we're going to have our UL. So we'll add the UL, and then we'll iterate through details.description. Now, description is now... actually, let's just show what this looks like. Let's show details.description. Is that weird if we just put it inside of a UL? So you see it's this long string that's separated by the bullet points, basically. Now, there's several different ways that we could render this. This will be a little bit hacky, but we're going to split this based on that star. and then we will map over it. So we'll grab each details and index. Details, is that a good variable to use there? I think I did use details, but that's any scoping thing. Yeah, that should probably not be, we'll just call this line maybe, or let's call it bullet. That'll be a little better. Map, and then for each one of these, what do we want to return? Well, we're going to return an li with a key of index and a class name. Wow, how does it do all this? We're going to change these pieces, but it got most of it. So this will be text purple 100, margin Y2, text small, and show out the bullet. And what are we missing here? Is it one more of those? That looks good. Cool. Now, the one thing I'm not going to do, and you could go and do this, is actually set this to have this little icon there beforehand. So you could add a before element or something like that and style it that way. Now, the last thing we're going to do, I'm getting tired. I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm just going to copy in this button. Now, we're not going to actually add any action, but this has got some basic styles for the button, and then it also has that fine print down below as a small element. So this will basically kind of line this stuff up. Now, the only thing we are missing now is we're not differentiating between the featured version and not. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy this whole render because all it is swapping out a few colors. But let us come back over, and I'm going to replace all of this. And what we're going to have is conditional. So if the details is a featured one, we're basically going to use the yellow border, the white background, the purple text, etc. Everything else is the exact same. Otherwise, we'll render exactly what we just did. So now we should see, based on that configuration of one being featured, now you see it here as featured. The cool thing is, again, going back to our record, if we look in pricing section and then update the featured to not be featured, for example. So if we save this and that's published and then come back and refresh, we should see that these are both actually the same now. So we have the ability to go and configure our website basically from our Headless CMS and DatoCMS. So quick little recap here. We are imitating the getting started with JavaScript course landing page from Chris Sev at better.dev. Go and check it out. Go and check out beginner Tailwind CSS from better.dev from Chris as well. I'll include links to those also so you can have them. And then we used DatoCMS to create these custom modular blocks that we could throw into a course landing page. We could mix and match. We could reorder them. And then by rendering those, by querying GraphQL in Next.js, we can render it no matter what format it gives it to us in or what order they're in or whatever. We can now go and render that for whatever way we want. I think this stuff is super cool. It's super powerful for building. Like after you have this template, you can build out as many course landing pages as you want by just going into your CMS and editing that way. So make sure to go and check out DatoCMS. You can sign up for a free account to check it out. Follow this demo. I have a link in the description below. Thanks as always for watching the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.